Now, the topic for the day that we have is the three major kinds of art which are prevalent in the world today and which are part of our history as well. Of course, for our history, it is the Indian art or the Hindu art which predominates, and Christian art has been a very small part of it, and then the Islamic art as well, because India was ruled by Muslim kings for almost 800-900 years. Now, I am going to show you, first of all, after some preliminary lecture, a preliminary introduction, I'm going to show you about something like 60-70 slides, which would give you an idea of images and symbols in Indian literature and art. And it is through them that I will establish certain concepts which have been as the most essential concepts in the history of Indian art and literature as well, and how these concepts have grown over a period of time, transformed and adjusted to the new historical situation. And also, I would talk about how this whole history has not been viewed in the proper perspective as it should have been. And then I will contrast the fundamental notions of Christian art and Islamic art. Some of the preliminary observations that I would like to make are like this. You see, this is a vast subject, and we can talk about a huge number of details as to what were the main subjects, let us say, in Islamic art or in Christian art or in Hindu art. And we can give massive details. But then, what were the principles, some of the essential principles, which constructed an aesthetic of each art form? What is it that made a whole continuity in Indian or Hindu art right from the beginning till the present day? There must be some ways of thinking. There must be some essential philosophic concepts which helped the artists to make use of what their predecessors had said or made or created, and to create something new. In other words, continuity. What is it that gave such big continuity to Indian art, which can be seen as an art recorded over almost 5,000 years? You see, right from the Rig Veda, the text of the Rig Veda, then the Harappan period, there must have been some concepts. And then how are these concepts, these fundamental concepts, different from Christian and Islamic cultural concept? So let's start with this first of all. In India, it was believed that the supreme reality, no matter what you call it, and different names were given in different systems of philosophy in India, like in Sankhya, it was Purusha and Prakriti, in Vedanta it was Brahma, In Jain thought it was Kaivalya. In Buddhist thought it was Nirvana, the supreme state of awareness, consciousness, truth. Whatever be the different name of this reality, according to the philosophic system, one thing was agreed upon in this land. And what was it? That the supreme reality, with form or without form, is equally valid. That Brahma can be Nirgun and Brahma can be Sagun. There is no contradiction between the Nirgun and the Sagun. Now this is very important. Like all the Devatas, Agni, Pushan, Usha, Indra, etc. of the Rigvedic pantheon, they are all seen as expressions of the same reality, a single reality. And yet, it is seen that they must manifest in diversity. This was one of the fundamental principles adopted. In contrast with that, because of a philosophical difference of approach, in the Christian world, it was believed that the supreme reality can never be expressed in any given form. Right? Because according to the Christian thought, creator is distinct from creation. Creator and creation can never be one. What is created is not the same or another manifestation of the Creator. So the difference between the creation or what is being created and the Creator is always there. And because of this fundamental notion of difference, creation can never be equated or fully expressed or be communicative of the Creator. And hence there can be no form of God. Right? This is one of the fundamental notions of Christianity, followed by Islam as well. In contrast with the Hindu notion that Roop and Aroop, Nirguna and Saguna, they are manifestations of the same. The same truth, the same reality expresses itself either in form or without form. So this great contradiction, which has been part of the Christian history and part of the Islamic history, and which has led to immense oppression, bloodshed, conflict, was not part of Indian history. And because this notion was fundamental to the Hindu or the Indian life, therefore art was entirely different. See, art was different because creation is God. Sarvam idam khalu Brahma. And when you say Sarvam, then creation is part of Sarvam. Creation cannot be out of Sarvam. Creation cannot be anything other than the Creator. Creation is only manifesting itself in another manner, but it is the Creator as well. So, this is the aesthetics, the fundamental aesthetics of Indian art. Once you see this approach, then you see how tremendous diversity is created. Great diversity is created in Indian art, and how certain things are reconciled or how certain things are continued from one step to another. I want to now give you, first of all, a tour of what I call the images and symbols in Indian literature and art. So we go on to the second slide, and here we take up the question, we take up the idea that what is Indian history? Is Indian history a series of invasions? Is Indian history a record of outside influences which were absorbed within the Indian civilization and amalgamated over a period of time? Or is Indian history created by certain fundamental concepts which are unique to this culture? Now, in this palimpsest model, which was propagated, mentioned, and then hence propagated by Jawaharlal Nehru in his discovery of India, you have history as a series of foreign influences. You know what is a palimpsest? Actually, in Mediterranean world, they used to make a book out of leather leaves, and on every leaf with a pen, without ink but with a sharp point, they would etch out something. They will write in whatever script they chose. They would write something, and so what was written on a leather leaf was the first draft or the first use of that leather leaf. And hence you filled the whole book by writing something. Maybe 100 years later, you wanted to use the same book because leather was very precious and that kind of a book was very precious. So you erased the writing by rubbing it off, and you wrote on it again. However, on careful examination, you could see what was written for the first time. You could see it. See, it was there for you to see. So, a palimpsest shows the first impression, the second impression, and maybe sometimes a third impression. And this is the metaphor taken for history, that what happened, let us say, 5,000 years ago is still surviving or still living, and India is thus an amalgamation of all the things that have accumulated in it. Another way of putting the same thing is that India is like a big inn, that people come, they stay, they go, or they disappear after a while, but they are there in their separate identity. Now this model, as you can see, does note certain aspects of history. But this model doesn't explain the idea of India, because it is not a model which pays attention to those fundamental concepts which can provide continuity. This is something which is limited in time, cannot connect to something later in time unless there is an amalgamation, and that amalgamation can take place only on the basis of certain concepts. So I'm going to show you those concepts which we have found in Indian history. I give you a definition of what I call a symbol. In Sanskrit, the word for symbol is sanket or ling. Ling means a mark or a sign or a symbol. Like Shivling. Shivling is a mark of Shiva. And sanket is another word which is used as a synonym for linga. Sanket. So the idea of a symbol or a sanket has been grammatically recorded in India. And it is a fundamental idea that there is a meaning, a concept, and that concept is carried on by a sign, a symbol, a sanket, a shabda, or a grammatical, or a word, or a grammatical sentence. Now, if you see the earliest period, then the earliest period of Indian history is recorded in the four Vedas, primarily in the Rig Veda. And what are the symbols in Rig Veda that we see? The domineering symbols of Rig Veda are the sun, the dawn, the moon, the fire, vajra, weapon, twins, elements, ghrita, milk, honey, tree, corn, light and darkness, horses, chariots, animals and birds. Now these were some of the very fundamental symbols used in the Vedic times. And again these symbols were full of meaning. And the most important activity which was practiced as a mode of worship in ancient Vedic times was the yajna. Is there any way of dimming this light? Because now with this light on, I can hardly see you. You know, this light up there. Can you reduce the intensity? Huh? Because it's so strong that I can hardly see my audience, and I'm not used to talking to people with whom I cannot in some way interact. Yes, while this is being done, let me carry on. Now, what was this particular light, which probably you are trying to use for videography, but I think if you can reduce the intensity, then it will be a little more comfortable to me. Yeah, that is fine. And you will be able to see this as well. Thank you. Now, what was sacrifice? What was yajna? What is the fundamental idea of yajna? We have very incomplete notions about yajna. Yajna is something like pouring oblations into fire for devatas. But yajna actually describes an act of creation and an act of surrender to the big cosmos. Because the altar of the yajna is perceived as taken to be a metaphor for the entire cosmos or creation. And whatever is offered to the gods, the devatas, through fire is actually the offering of the one who is doing the sacrifice. So it is the sacrificer who offers himself to creation. In other words, it is a method of uniting the individual self to the ultimate reality. And this was done in a very complicated manner in all kinds of altars, etc., that you see here. And sometimes there was Pashu Yag also, animal sacrifice also. There were so many kinds of different sacrifices or yagas or yajna. But all of them finally ended in a holy bath. The bath or snan or purification with water is one of the fundamental symbols and one of the fundamental rituals of Indian spirituality. So all the major yajnas or symbols, they conclude with a bath. Now, this was the Vedic period. After the Vedic period, we come to the age of Harappa, or what is described as the Harappan Valley civilization. And what we find here is something very concrete. We do not find any archaeological objects from the Vedic age. That is why there is so much controversy about the Vedic age, whether it was 5,000 years ago or whether it was more than that, 6,000, 7,000, whether it was before the Harappan period or after. There are conflicting views. I don't want to go into any of those at the moment. I just want to tell you what are the major symbols that you find in Harappan period, and you will see that they have a continuity even to this day. For instance, the first is swastika. Now these are the seals of swastika which you find from the Harappan civilization, and you find swastika here. So swastika goes back to the oldest recorded symbol in India. Swastika has many meanings. I need not go into them, like the wheel of time and the wheel of good living or the wheel of prosperity. The fundamental technology, elephant and love of animals and close association of animals with Harappan people. So here you find that there is a small necklace locket which is made out of clay and was used by Harappan people, maybe mostly for children or maybe not. Now, this is an image I would like you to pay special attention to. This is the Harappan woman. If you look at this figure, you would find that this is the prototype of the figure which occurs in Indian art throughout till very modern times. What does it show? First of all, it shows a very elaborate headgear, right? There's a big decoration of hair. Then there is a necklace. And after that, as you come down, there is a lower necklace or hanging necklace, is something which hangs between the breasts. And then you have over the belly button what is called Rashana in Sanskrit, or a belt. Now these are some of the adornments which have been used throughout Indian art because they were used throughout by Indian women. And what does this signify? First of all, hair, elaborate hair. Now, play with hair symbolizes a freedom of sexuality, a freedom to communicate, a freedom of the woman to dress herself, to declare herself through elaborate hairdos. All Puritan cultures, they do not allow show of hair for women. All Puritan people don't allow. The hair, kesha, signifies shringar. It signifies ornamentation. So elaborate hairdos, they are very important, and they signify a freedom for women, which is not just the freedom to make their hair, but freedom of all kinds, freedom of all status and movement. Then, the important thing is that the figure here is shown in woman, of the woman as the mother, somebody who procreates. So there is prominence given to her breast through ornamentation and to her hips by the girdle around. Now this defines the fundamental role of the procreation and the procreative ability of the woman in the Indian system. That she is special because she procreates. Men don't procreate. Men cannot procreate. She is the mother. So the significance of the mother and the role of the mother is very early recognized and institutionalized and given a significance. We come next to what you find in Harappan times, the tree of well-being, or the kalpataru, the tree of prosperity. So you find here a tree underneath which there are bulls. Bulls are playing. There was a great importance of the Harappan bull. Bull was a major animal in their economy, and the bull also signified power. It also signified eminence in terms of ideas, etc. And therefore, this whole notion of this very significant Harappan bull. All these are from the seals, the clay seals which have been discovered, about 4,000 of them from various Harappan sites. Then you see here the bull again in a slightly different form. And after that you see this fantastic animal which has the body of the bull, but the mouth of probably a deer with a horn. So this is a unicorn. And a truly fantastic animal with 3 heads. And these are some of the pictures of some rituals which were probably held in Harappan times. And we cannot really make much sense out of them because we have not been able to read the Harappan script so far. Now, another fundamental concept of Indian civilization, yoga. And this is the Harappan yogi. This is the seal of Harappan yogi. And you can see that the yogi is sitting here in what is now called in modern yogic asana classification as Shakti Chalan Mudra, and the asana for Shakti Chalan. This is the Mohenjo-daro bath, and people believe that this is a remnant of one of the altars which were used in the Vedic times. Another altar, different altars, and finally Namaste, because Namaste, there is this clay toy here which shows that Namaste is as old as the Harappan times. In other words, Namaste in India is perhaps 10,000 years old. See, this is archaeological evidence and you cannot contest it. Now when you come to epic times, the notions become more complicated, and we have notions of the king and his people, Raja and Praja, and we have a social hierarchy which later on developed into the Varna ashram system. Here you have another artifact which shows the earth as the producer, as the woman, as Prakriti, as prosperity. So you find earth, out of the belly of which trees are growing. So, and there is immense foliage all around her. So, earth as a Vasudha. The word Vasudha is a major word in describing the environment in India. Very early, you have the notion of the cow as the sacred animal and cow as the paradigm of the mother, the cow and the calf. And these things are all seen in either cave carvings or sculptural carvings. Now, this is from the Ashokan period. If you notice that this woman is repeating some of the fundamental things which you saw in the Harappan woman. That there is an elaborate hairdo, right? There is great emphasis on her breasts, the big breasts or the payodhara. That is, she is the feeder of the child, and the broad hips which signify woman as the procreator. So the same idea is repeated thousands of years later. This shows the continuity. Love of snakes is again a matter of continuity. Then the importance of the householder, the mithuna, the husband and the wife, the man and the woman. Now, man and the woman, they make up the Grihastha ashram. And the Grihastha ashram is the one which sustains the Brahmacharya, the Vanaprastha and the Sannyas ashram. Out of all the four ashrams, it is not sannyas which is the greatest, but as the Mahabharata says in its very first canto, it is the Grihastha ashram which is most important and most significant, because it is the Grihastha who caters to and provides for the needs of the brahmachari, the student, that is, provide education to the young in society, to the elderly when they have retired from active money making, that is the Vanaprastha, when you go into the contemplative period, and into sannyas, that is, into pursuit of the spiritual. So, significance of man and woman as a grihasthi, the one who has a relationship of sex for the sake of creating prosperity. So the notion of mithun in Hindu art, that is the couple, is not hedonistic. It is not based upon the notion of pleasure only. Of course there is pleasure in the sexual relationship, but that relationship is for a higher purpose, that is for creation of a family, and the family that sustains the larger families around it. See, so this is the notion. Now, as you know that in classical times, there was a belief in not just the 4 ashramas, brahmacharya, grahastha, vanaprastha and sannyas, but also in the 4 aims of life, dharma, artha, kama and moksha. So, in this piece, what is shown is that the couple, the grahastha ashram couple is shown, and then the sannyasi is shown. So there is Buddha, and around him are his disciples. And Buddha and his disciples and the circle around them represent a cosmos, that they are a true reality of harmony and ultimate knowledge. So the grihastha and the sannyas, the dharma, both are reflected here. Musicians, and then when other philosophies developed, the tantric philosophies, then the tantric art reflected the same thing. So you find here many notions of tantric art. This is again the notion of Buddha as the center of creation. Vishnu as the cosmos, that is the Vishwarupa. Vishnu expressing the great macrocosmic reality. Again, Shiva expressing, Shiva Linga doesn't mean the phallus, it means the focal point from which creation emanates, the creator in the deepest sense. Another later period image of woman as the procreator, which you find again and again. And then the Shaiva art elaborates on the notion of Shiva as grahastha as well as yogi. You see, Shiva in the Indian tradition is not just yogi. He is also the one who has a family. So the reality of the family and the reality of the yogi, they go together. And as Kalidas, I think, said that Yah parastat yatinam kanta sammishya dehopya vishaya manasam yah parastat yatinam. That this is Shiva, in whose lap Parvati is sitting. He is the greatest of love makers, and yet at the same time he is the greatest of the renunciate, or greatest of the yogis. So these images come again and again, and in art, and this is showing the marriage of Shiva and Parvati, another image of marriage of Shiva and Parvati, various notions of God and his consort. You see, in Indian art, the God is not alone. There has to be his wife. Or in other words, God is not just man. He is not just God the Father. He is father and mother, or man and woman together. And there are various philosophical systems in India which elevate the mother over the father. Now, because cosmos is imagined as a union of the male and the female principle, therefore all this artistic expression developed in India. Here you have a very famous sculpture which illustrates a line from the poetry of Shankaracharya, in which the chin of Parvati is sung about. I mean, the praises, how beautiful is the chin of Parvati. This is depicted in the sculpture and in the verse. So, most of these notions, they come to be expressed in Indian art again and again through a variety of gods, but these fundamental notions are what are present all the time through different expressions of art. Now, sexuality is also made part of the tantric tradition. So you find here certain tantric images from Khajuraho. In medieval times, the love of Radha and Krishna, male and female principle, came to be expressed through the idea of romantic love or the idea of Madhura Bhakti. And a huge amount of painting was done in medieval times. Not so much sculpture, but painting to express that. And most of the Indian paintings express the same idea. And here, just as there was Buddha, the renunciate shown earlier, you have medieval times where yogis are shown. The cult of the mother or Shakti, the cult of Omkar, the cult of Kali, and various images of Kali as ferocious, because Kali, when she is as the destroyer, then that is to be seen again and again. So this immense variety is what you see, and in modern times, most of this comes to be expressed through some sort of a calendar art, because the 19th century and the 20th century are not the period when great temples or sculpture was built. So calendar art catered to mass consumption and to adornment of Indian homes through calendars and by gods and goddesses on the calendar. So you find that kind of an impression, and in India, any important idea can take the form of a Devi or a Devata, and therefore the notion of India as Bharat Mata, India as a nation, was also put forth and is now an important part of our life. So some of these images express that. So this in brief, I have tried to show to you is the story in which some of these fundamental concepts are there, that the image and the lack of image, or the nirgun, they express the same reality, that on social level, the unity of the male and the female principle, it is not that the female is in any way less important, that it is equally important, and in the deepest sense, the male and female are again an expression of the same ultimate reality. So these are and several other notions that I have talked about. Of course, there are many other notions which are part of Indian philosophy, such as rebirth, such as karma, etc. But it would take a long time to bring out the images for them all the time. Now, in contrast with this, you see that the Christian art was a limited art. You see, when Christianity comes to Greece, what does it do? Christianity, in coming to Greece, tries to copy some of the ideas of the Greeks. So the first idea they take is incarnation. The Greeks believed in incarnation. The Christians took just partly the notion that God can have a son and that he sent his son to save mankind. But God does not have a daughter, God does not have a wife, God does not have a mother, God does not have a family, which was the case with the Greeks and the Hindu pantheon. The Hindu gods or the Greek gods, they were never single, or they were not just having a wife. They had mother and father and children and brothers and sisters. So in other words, the Greek gods and the Hindu gods, they were part of the totality of things. Christianity takes only one aspect of it. Then Christianity also imposes a limitation in terms of the story that it is going to tell. They replace the stories of the myths of the Greek gods by their own myth. Now, what is the Christian myth? The Christian myth is that God created this world. He put Adam and Eve into the Garden of Eden. They disobeyed God and they were thrown out. And then after a long time, God sent his own son to suffer for the sin that Adam and Eve had committed. And therefore, those out of mankind who believe in the suffering of Christ shall go back to God the Father through the medium of Christ. Now this is the Christian story, right? Now when you do art, you need not just one but many stories. If you have only one story to tell, it's difficult to go on and on. So there are hundreds of Greek myths, you see. And therefore, they are told by dozens of poets. And similarly, there are hundreds and thousands of Hindu stories about gods and goddesses. And therefore, there are so many Puranas, Ramayana and Mahabharata and Kavyas and other things. So there is immense variety. Whereas in the Christian world, you cannot have any variety. The variety of the Christian world is, as a matter of fact, extremely limited. I'll just show you some images of early Greek art. I don't happen to have very many today with me, but they more or less represent what was painting. And basically it was the painting of Virgin Mary with Christ. You see, I hope I'm able to locate it. Now see, this is one of the image, and this is the image of an angel. So in the Christian pantheon, there is God the Father, there is Jesus, his son, the mother of Jesus, Mary, a few angels, like this is Angel Michael, and Michael is here. Now you can see what's happened. I'm sorry, it's not projecting.
Only this one was not.
Only this one was not projected?
Yeah, everything else was okay.
Right now.
No, is it? This will not be, unless it is a PowerPoint or something, it will not be. But can't this be just shown as a screenshot? Perhaps not. Anyway, I think then we'll have to just do with words. So in Christian art, therefore, there is a limited representation. Art needs variety. And art needs incarnation. You see, the concept of incarnation, avatar, that God comes down to earth. He becomes human. He becomes Rama or Krishna. And then he leads a life like human beings. He is divine as well as human at the same time. Right? So, you have a long, long story called the Ramayana, that is the Leela of Ram and the Leela of Krishna and various other gods that incarnate. Now, when you do not have incarnation or very limited incarnation, then this possibility doesn't exist. This is the fundamental principle of variety of art in India as contrasted with, let us say, Christian art. Now, the question doesn't arise in terms of Islamic art because there will be no image at all. They will not paint any image. It is totally forbidden. And therefore, what you find that in Islamic art, you have only foliage, leaves, different kinds of some natural objects which are shown as non-godly. The whole idea of depicting something divine, something which is related to the supreme reality, is not possible. Because there making every kind of an image is forbidden. The Christians also make paintings two-dimensional because they did not want to carve out a three-dimensional image. At times they did, like friezes in the church or some kind of an image showing, but that was also limited by the subject. So this is one of the most fundamental differences between Hindu, Christian and Islamic art. Now very often we confuse Islamic art with certain architectural motifs which come from certain countries like Iran or Central Asia, and we call that as Islamic art. That here is this dome, this is a Central Asian dome and this is Islamic art. Now that is really not Islamic art. That is Iranian art. Just as the Mughals were wearing, after Akbar, Rajasthani clothes. They were not wearing Central Asian clothes. So their clothing could not be called as Central Asian clothing. It was Rajasthani clothing. It belonged to the area of the Rajputs and the culture of the Rajputs. Similarly, so much of what goes under the name of Islamic art is really Central Asian art, Iranian art, or art from what is today the region of Turkey. And we have to be clear that art is that which is based upon certain fundamental notions of how to create a life and values in life. So thank you very much. If there are any questions, I'd like to take them.